Hi, I was recently interviewed by Sherri Rabinowitz on her podcast, Chatting with Sherri. It's available on Blog Talk Radio. During our pre show chat, we had so much fun talking about the science fiction and fantasy TV shows and movies we grew up with that I invited Sherri to the DreamForge channel just to continue the conversation. FYI, you'll find the link to my episode on Chatting with Sherri in the description below. And if you like to reminisce about shows from the 60s, 70s, and beyond, stick with us. Let's engage.
Take your seat. The human adventure is just beginning.
Hello, DreamForge.
Hi, Sherri. Welcome back to the DreamForge channel. As our listeners may remember, you're of Sherri's Playhouse and chatting with Sherri, and you do a lot of cool stuff. And I know Sherri's Playhouse right now has online. Like at iTunes and stuff, play called Never Too Late by Mary D. Brooks. And that is about the Lambros family and how their gatherings in Sydney, Australia, and it's about the goal of securing a yes vote on the question of whether or not same-sex marriage should be legalized in Australia. But it's really kind of a multi-generational family thing, and it reminds me of some of the most popular shows today, like Yellowstone and that sort of thing, where basically you're seeing generations of people over time all kind of deal with the same thread of this that runs through their family. And I thought that was really cool. And then you do Chatting with Sherri, which I've been on many times, and where you interview some really cool people and have just some wonderful conversations. Mike Jack Stombos was on there, and his anthologies Murder Birds and Murder Bugs and Monsters, that he's done. And you just recently had like makeup and hair designer Deborah Lancer there, and you've had on award-winning author Catherine Kovacic, I think is her last name, but
Yeah.
but you basically interview tons of people all the time, and they're always really cool interviews. So even though I just said everything, why don't
Yeah,
you tell us a
I'm
little?
amazing.
Why don't
I'm
you just
done. Let's
tell? You're
go.
done. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Never Too Late by Mary D. Brooks and what that was like, and how that's going.
Okay, well, it's out and people can listen to it. It's a really fun play. It's a very lighthearted play. We've been doing some very it's based on the Zoe and Eva stories that Mary D. Brooks had as novels, and we've done several of them. And the last couple we've done have been very, very, very serious. And Mary and I both discussed it. And we got to do a lighthearted one. We got to do something fun. So she wrote Never Too Late. But because she's Mary, she had to put an important issue into the story, which was the big vote for same-sex marriage, and Love won. They won the vote, and it's a fun play. It's, as you said, it's multi-generational, um, and it introduces a lot of new characters, but the old favorites come in too, so you get everything you want from a Mary D. Brooks play. And it's doing really well. I mean, people love it. I've been getting great reviews, and people have been writing me asking, will Mary be back? And I go, of course she'll be back. Uh, and so that's really gone well. And we've been rehearsing our next radio play, and that's going to be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It was adapted by Everett Roberts, and it's really good. We're almost at the end of this week. Actually, we're at the end of rehearsals, and we're going to be recording it. So we're that close. Our goal is to make it be broadcast on the weekend of Halloween, but you never know. We because we have to loop and we have to do other stuff. And we got the special effects and music in, so it may not make the Halloween goal, but that's our goal.
Well, I think I'm on your Patreon alert for when the new stuff comes out, but make sure if it's Halloween's my favorite holiday of the year. So if you have a Halloween thing coming out, send me an email, just alert me because I will be glad to alert, our audience that's there. And for my part, what I usually do on Halloween, and I just bought a story for Halloween, but we publish online a news story that's free for everyone. And then we also provide links to all of the sort of little bit of we don't really publish horror, but over years of collecting stories, we've got some scary ones, and we usually say to people on Halloween, here's all our scary stories and here's our new Halloween story. So I'd be glad to promote, your play as well if Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's coming out near Halloween.
Oh yeah, and I'm hoping it does. Fingers and toes crossed, but
I know,
I'm
I
not
know
going
how
to
that
guarantee it.
I know how that is. I know how that is. Schedules can be extremely difficult to keep, and life happens. Like when we originally scheduled to record this session, power went out in our neighborhood, and I had to text you on my phone, and it's like, yep, no power. So I
Can't
so
do it.
just that and other scheduling things do happen.
I
Now
know, I know.
I also encourage people to keep up with chatting with Sherri because you have so many cool interviews, and what is your schedule on interviews? Because you seem to just have a ton of them. So how often do you try to do those?
Well, I interview people when they're available. But scheduling can be real tricky because sometimes people have things coming up that they want to do at a certain time to make it. I try to do it. I don't always do it because you know I can't put everybody on the same days. So that's the hard part. Scheduling is the bane of my existence. Um, but like I love talking to people, and I like you said, I've had some great interviews. Deborah just was broadcast yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. No, day before yesterday. It was Thursday night. Um, sorry, I'm a little fluxed. Um, but Deborah's Lancer is a award-winning makeup and hair, both artist and designer, and she is married to Roger Lancer, the cinematographer.
And
And
she's been nominated for Emmys if I'm correct.
yeah, she got a nomination for an Emmy from the Starter Wife, and she loved it because they got to go to LA and they got to go to the Emmys, and she said it was so exciting. Um, it's a delightful interview. She's wonderful. She talked about how her and Roger met, and and that's all Kenneth Branagh because they met on one of his movies. And it's a very interesting interview. How she started, all the stuff that's happening. Uh, I really enjoyed it, and people seem to have been liking it. I'm getting a lot of, "Oh my god, you guys had so much fun!" So that's always a good sign when people said we had fun. That means you had fun listening.
And just I'll plug myself. I'm in your recent list as well. So if you go and you look at the chatting with Sherri list, I'm probably 3 or 4 down. So we had a good interview there as well. So
Oh
so
yeah, you were yeah,
it
you were
was
it's about 3 weeks
couple
ago, right?
about 3, yeah, something like that. It was
Yeah,
recently. It was recently.
and we had
Uh, yes, we did.
fun.
Um, so today, what we're going to have fun with is basically when we were actually prepping for that interview, we started talking about science fiction and fantasy in our lives and things and how we got into this in our childhood, and it just sparked in my head as like this would be a really cool conversation to have with Sherri. So that's kind of what I wanted to do today. So I will start. I will get us warmed up because I'm really gonna go back here. I'm not this isn't a serious, oh yes, 2001 is the greatest movie ever made sort of thing. It was, but uh besides that, I just want to talk about even just childhood things and all that. So I wanted to say, growing up, the first thing that I remember that had science fiction to do with it was an animated series called Scott McCloud's Space Angel, or it might have been called Space Angel, and the main character's name was Scott McCloud. And this is when I'm probably 5 years old or so, and we just have a little black and white TV. But something about it just, because my mother basically, that was, daycare. Set Scott in front of the TV, go do stuff. And so I was just mesmerized by this, and would get really, excited whenever it was on. And it was essentially a little Star Trekky, and you had kind of a space force that was trying to, keep the world safe from, marauding aliens and that kind of thing. And it was a small ship with a small crew, but there was that sort of little family atmosphere on the crew, and they were out there having their adventures. And um, at that point, it was the technical thing that I think caught my imagination, that there could be spaceships, and that there could be, just the idea that, people could go out and explore and meet these strange aliens just captivated me. So I remember even actually playing in my sandbox, and my mom, this was in the day when your mom would hang clothes out to dry on the line out in the yard, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I would take her spare clothespins, and they would actually be guys in spacesuits, and they would be exploring the world I built for them in the sandbox, kind of idea.
Aw.
Yeah, because I didn't have any little spacemen yet at that point, or I hadn't gotten to the point where they were even buying me toy soldiers or anything yet. So the clothespins became my astronauts.
Well,
But
the first thing I remember was, well, it's sort of a combination fantasy and science fiction, but it's weird. The first thing that was science fiction, fantasy-ish, was a Flintstones episode with the Great Kazoo, who was like a Martian who came an alien who was invading Earth, and they picked Fred and Barney as subjects. It was actually a series of episodes with
I
this
remember I remember this.
silly
I'm
character.
picturing the Great Kazoo in my head while you're doing. Didn't he float in the air kind of? And
Uh-huh. Yeah, he would
yeah, yeah,
float in
yeah,
front of them, telling them off and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess the other one I remember that was science fiction. This is this shows my age, but was the Jetsons.
Uh-huh.
Um, the Jetsons,
Yes,
here's
I
George
absolutely know the
Jetson.
Jetson.
That was the first science fiction thing I ever saw. I was about like the age you were, about 5. Both those
Yeah.
shows.
Yes.
I would
I remember the Jetsons, and I remember the Kazoo as well. But I guess it was my bent toward hard, like sciencey things, like that was even showing itself then, because I was much more captivated with anything that showed what looked like real world equipment and real world like exploration and that sort
yeah.
of thing. But definitely I saw the Jetsons. There's actually, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to figure it out while we're having this conversation, but there's a Pittsburgh firm that I believe is involved in high-tech aluminum that recently redid the Jets, like a couple of years ago. They redid the Jetsons opening, but using real people and super high def CGI and that
Oh,
sort
how
of thing. And
cool.
they used the Jetsons theme, and they used that as their promotion for their company and getting the word about their company out. So I'm going to make myself a note. If I can find that, I'll add a link in the comments. Um,
I can't. Oh, Judy's the I tried remember the wife's name. It was George Jetson. Judy's the daughter. Elroy is the
yeah,
son. But I can't remember
you
the
have to
wife's
remember the song. You have to play the song over in your
name.
head,
I know.
right?
That's what I was doing, and I was doing it, and this is George Jetson, and then I can't. His wife.
Uh,
I
let's see.
blanked out on her name. Is
I'll
that
say
sad?
Jetson song. Let me see if I can figure this out. Jetson song, because Google is our friend. Theme song, the Jetsons. I need the lyrics, is what I need. Oh, it's not typing for me. Okay, Jetson theme song lyrics. Come on, come on.
Oh, her name is Jane. I looked it up. I just
Oh
put
yeah,
George Jetson's wife. I did the cheat.
Jane. Yeah, Jane, his wife. Meet George Jetson, his
Jane
boy
his
elderly
wife.
daughter Judy. Jane, his wife. Yeah, boy,
Yeah.
she gets like third billing.
I
Um,
know.
but yeah, so I remember watching the Jetsons too. The other one I remember that was in that time frame, and again, my love of more like hard sciencey things was a show called Fireball XL5, which was an Anderson production. I believe it was Jerry Anderson is his name. Who, if you remember Space 1999,
Hmm.
um, that this was like one of his first productions because he came up doing puppet shows, a number of them, and some of them were more fantasy and more childrenish, it's just regular children's entertainment. And this was like one of his first science fiction productions, and much like Scott McCloud's Space Angel, it involved a spaceship, a small crew that had that feel of kind of uh family kind of relationship, not in being related, but just they're not just, they care for one another, and they basically work together very well as a team, and that sense of things always appealed to me as well. And Fireball was the name of their particular spaceship, and it was like a little fleet of these spaceships, and they were doing the same thing that the other show was doing. They were protecting Earth from the bad guys in space, kind of idea. So they had really cool motorcycles that floated. So they were hovercraft motorcycles.
Hmm.
They had a robot. I think their robot was Robbie, and he was like a co-pilot, and he looked like he was all made of plastic or glass, and he was transparent, which was really cool. And they also, since they didn't want to spend money on spacesuits, they took oxygen pills. So when they needed to be out, when they needed to be out in space, they took oxygen pills. Now there are definitely more problems than that when you're out in space, but those were interesting ideas that I liked. So that was a big influence. And one of the things I remember from that show particularly was that my mom bought for me at a local store the toy. They made the spaceship and into a toy, which was my favorite toy in the world. And if I had it today, you can find them on like eBay for $1,500 would you'd be getting off easy. So I had several toys like that. If I had kept them, I could have, paid my way through college or something. But go ahead, you were about to say something?
Oh, that's funny. Oh no, I was just thinking live action, the first thing. Okay, this is really funny. Did you ever watch Gilligan's Island?
Yes. Gilligan's Island was
After
also one of my shows.
after Gilligan's Island, there was a show that nobody but me seems to remember. My brother doesn't.
Was it a time travel show and these astronauts
No,
went back in time? No? Okay.
no, no. It was with Alan Hale and Bob Denver, and they were
Really?
two janitors, and they somehow got stuck in a spaceship going up into space. They were cleaning it,
Really?
and
Really?
yeah, and yes, and they go off into space, and they're told it's like they are really lost in space. And that was
Wow.
another. I remember this show, and nobody else seems to.
I do not remember the show. I do not remember the show. So this
It
was
was
this was you mean this was after Gilligan's Island? You mean this after
oh
Gilligan's
yeah,
Island was
this
finished and
was
that
like
show was off
after
the air?
Gilligan's Island, but
Okay.
before they started doing the TV movies. So it was
Okay.
like between. And it was, what they used to do on Saturday mornings is first they have the cartoons, and then the afternoon they have live action shows. Like I used to watch that. I used to watch ISIS about uh, archaeology and history teacher who goes to Egypt. She finds a necklace, and when she says ISIS, she becomes ISIS. That's another show.
Okay.
Uh, but that was one of those shows. It was Saturday morning and after the cartoons, and they had live action shows, and that was one of them.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
I,
I
I it,
remember.
I don't
Yeah.
remember the name of the show. I just remember how funny it was and how disappointed I was that it was only one season.
Okay. It wasn't the Far Out Space Nuts by Sid and Marty Krofft. That wasn't uh because I see Bob Denver was on that. Hmm.
Does it have Ellen Hale too?
I don't know. Let me see.
It has to have both of them.
Far Out
It could
Space
be that. It could
Nuts.
be Far Out Space Nuts. I don't remember the name of the show, or I would have said it.
Um, it does not look like it has Alan Hale in it.
Oh, it was both of
Just
them.
okay. Um, but
It was
anyway,
sort of the
yes.
same characters. Even though they weren't the same characters, it was sort of the same characters.
Mhm.
He was always getting him into trouble. Bob Dever was always getting Ellen Hale's character in trouble. Same, it's like Gilligan and Skipper
There you go.
in
It,
space.
it it worked once, put it in space. There you go.
Uh-huh.
I also Saturday morning cartoons were also very big for me. The one that would have been fantasy science fiction related that uh, really became like a touchstone for me was Johnny Quest, The Adventures of Johnny Quest,
I remember
um,
that.
which was it had a very serious kind of, compared with other Saturday morning cartoons, it had a very serious thematic, you know, drama kind of thing that was going under it, and I think that influenced a lot of people because even when you watch movies like The Incredibles today, um, you can look at the way they've framed scenes, the way they've done things, and you can say those guys obviously love Johnny Quest, and this is this scene or the way they framed this or the way they put that building in the background or whatever. It's like, they're paying homage to their love of Johnny Quest by, doing that particular bit. So yeah, so that was a big influence, but there were lots of kid shows on the fantasy kind of thing that I loved. One was called the Herculoids, which actually took place on an alien planet and involved again a family of uh, people who had these fantastic animals like a rhinoceros kind of thing that could use its horn like a cannon, and a blob that could do all kinds of elastic stuff, and a big dragony creature. And again, they just protected their planet from the bad guys. But I remember that show, that was the Herculoids. And
Well, how about Lost in Space? And we just lost Mark Goddard.
oh, I didn't know that. So
Yeah,
I'm
he
sorry
just
to hear
passed
that.
away
But
recently.
oh,
He was major. Oh, I can't remember his name.
Don.
Uh,
His name was
something
Don.
West.
Don
Something
West.
West.
It was Don West.
Yes, that's it.
Major
And
Don
he,
West.
he was he was the pilot. He wasn't actually part of the Robinson family because then he couldn't be all in love with Judy.
Yes. Um. So yeah, that was also
That was
as you're
Saturday
going
morning
along.
too.
Um. Really, I didn't realize that was Saturday morning.
Well, it
But
started then. Yeah,
huh,
Saturday. Well, maybe Saturday afternoon, but it was still Saturday. It was part of that was part of the important cartoon time for every child.
for every child. Okay. But yes, that was a big influence on me as well. That was pre Star Trek. I Because I
Hmm.
think Star Trek came along a couple years later. But it's interesting, as you grow older, then these different shows are coming along, and they're all a little more serious, or that kind of thing than the last one. But yeah, I probably watched all the episodes of Lost in Space. And what was fascinating to me, because it was on for like 3 years or whatever, and I was growing during those 3 years. So for me, and I think the beginning, actually, they were trying to be a little more serious science fiction,
They
and then by
were.
the by
They,
the by the end, they were going a little more into crazy fantasy kind of stuff.
I saw Bill Mummy on an interview show. Actually, this was an Australian interview show, but it was really interesting. I like Australian stuff. Anyway,
Mhm.
he was talking about the show, and he said that he what's the guy who did all those shows?
Irwin Allen. Irwin Allen.
Irwin Allen. Irwin
Yes,
Allen
because we have.
he wanted a serious show, and if you watch, he said the first 8 episodes were very serious. Dr. Smith was not in it.
Yeah, well, Dr. Smith, I think even Dr. Smith, when he uh was introduced, he was an actual bad guy. Like I think he killed someone in the first show that he was in to, because he was supposed to be the spy kind of thing. But then
Yeah,
he quickly showed his kind of more silly side, and Irwin Allen said, I think that works better. Do that.
actually, they got a lot of letters saying you're scaring our kids.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's what Bill said. He said that they got a lot of letters saying you're
Okay.
scaring our children. So that's why. So that's why Jonathan started playing the crazy Dr. Smith. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, because it lightened it up. It made it more fun. But yeah, the zany part was because it was just too scary for Saturday television.
Oh, wow. Um, because by the end, it was they had an episode called like the Great Vegetable Rebellion, in which
Oh
they were
God, that was the
they were dealing
stupidest
with
thing.
they were dealing with aliens who were a giant carrot, and the Dr. Smith was turning into a celery stalk and stuff like that. So it went that way from serious to that, I think, was the height of their campiness kind of thing.
Mhm.
But Irwin Allen did a bunch of he wasn't so much the serious science fiction person as much as kind of almost the science fiction showman kind of guy.
I
So
forgot what was the other one where they
oh,
were in
he
the
did.
center of the earth.
I don't remember the center of the earth, but I remember it shows he did one called Land of the Giants,
Land of the
where
Giants.
people were little people. He did one called the Time Tunnel. He did the Time Tunnel.
Yeah. That one was
Um
really good. That actually was much more mature.
that one was more mature, and it gave them the opportunity to reuse B footage from every, you know, ancient movie. If there was if there was b-roll footage from any castle or Napoleonic Wars or whatever, that then they could use it in the series as they traveled back through time, so
I think
probably
Time
cut down on their
Tunnel was
costs.
actually a nighttime show. It wasn't like this is he left the Saturday morning
Hmm.
children's stuff and he had moved to because Time Tunnel was more serious. And if I remember right, that was like it may not have been prime time. It may have been like a 7 o'clock or something. But yeah, it was at night.
And Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which was also a primetime
I
show.
love that
He did
show. That
Voyage
was
to the
my
Bottom of the Sea,
favorite.
and it also took a little bit of the same kind of turn that Lost in Space did, because early on they were more serious, and there was actually a Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea movie, which was a serious movie about nuclear war and exploding the atmosphere and all that kind of thing. And then that transitioned over time to the point where it was almost every week was the new guy in the monster suit crashing through the subwalls, and and stuff, going after them. So it kind of got sillier as it went too, and that was
Wasn't
probably. Go ahead.
wasn't the original Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea a movie? Because I remember
Yes.
Kirk
I don't
Douglas
I
in
don't
it.
think I don't think Kirk Douglas was in it, but it was a movie. I think Walter Pigeon was in it. He would have played the
Yeah, he
sub
played Captain
commander.
Nemo.
And
I
the
think it was Captain Nemo, wasn't it Captain Nemo?
I don't know, but I don't think it was a movie like at the theater movie, but I remember it being a TV movie, I think, before it
Yeah,
was a
it,
series.
it was like Wonderful World of Disney. It was like the Sunday Disney
Hmm,
night
okay.
movie.
Okay.
Disney did a lot of science fiction. People
I
don't realize
I
that.
I remember Disney things as more like Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone, and um uh there were some other ones that were like frontier kind of episodes, but definitely
They did a
Voyage.
lot of that because that was popular in the 60s.
Yeah,
In
but
I mean,
Voyage to the
I'm
Bottom of the
more a
Sea.
Western person. I didn't watch any of those.
Hmm. I do remember Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And one of my favorite, again, technical things from that was the flying sub. They had this manta shaped small submarine that could basically leave a submarine underwater, and it could reach the surface, and then it could take off, and then it could dive underwater, and so that was super cool. I actually have a model of that on my shelf behind me. So it's one of my favorite little flying craft sort of things. but those were cool. And then
Uh,
I
um,
was, go
oh
ahead.
my God, Barbara Eden was in it. Barbara
Oh,
Eden was in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
that's
I just
true.
looked it up.
That's true. Now that you
Barbara
mention it,
Eden
she
and
she
Joan
was.
Fontaine and Walter Pidgeon.
Because it was, like I said, that first movie was kind of a serious science fiction movie, and it was almost environmental because they were talking about how mankind had caused the, I don't know if it was the ozone layer, but it was some area in the atmosphere to catch fire, and the fire was destroying civilization, and the Sea View, which was the name of the submarine in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, had to use its nuclear missiles to try to detonate that and set things back to normal, something like that. So it
It
was
had
actually,
quite a cast. Peter Lorre, Regis
uh-huh.
Toomey, Robert Sterling, Michael and Sarah, Frankie Avalon.
Yeah, I
Very
remember, like
young
I said, that
Frankie
was
Avalon.
that they were trying to be serious then. And then
Yeah.
later on, if you look at the series much later on, you'll probably see some guy in a rubber suit standing in a pond, trying to be a giant, capturing the submarine with his big, you know, algae covered hands or
Big
something. So
hands.
so so it went quite campy. Um, but as time was going on there, I was 9 years old when Star Trek premiered. And I remember that as being like it wasn't that I
Mm-hmm.
became a Star Trek fan over time. I became a Star Trek fan, instantly fell in love with it because it was on. I don't remember what time it was on, but it was an evening. My mom was making dinner. I was watching this show, and the very first episode was the one with the salt creature. But these guys, like, beamed down to a planet, and they had phasers, and there was this big ship in orbit that looked like a magnificent sculpture, and it all just mesmerized me immediately, so much that when the first commercial came on, I had to run out to the kitchen and scream at my mother and tell her all about how fantastic this was. And you won't believe this, mom. But the
I
thing one of
actually didn't watch Star Trek when then. I watched Star Trek later, but not when it first came on. I did not.
well, one of the things that I think was very good science fiction telling, and like, we do DreamForge magazine, and a lot of the stories I get, the mistake that people make is trying to explain things to the reader rather than simply letting the story take place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about, like, now we're all familiar with, like, the transporter, right, and beaming up and beaming down, and the concept of how the phasers work, and a starship with warp drive, and it's like that has worked its way kind of into the consciousness of people, and it just seems like it's foundational or fundamental. But back then, at that point in 1966, I think, um, those concepts were not things that people knew. And what I
Mm-hmm.
what I really praise Star Trek for doing, even in that first episode, was it just threw you in. It's like they didn't explain, now we're going to use the matter transporter thing, which actually breaks people down into their component, atoms, and beams it down to the planet where it's nobody explained anything. It's just like, energize, they're going down. And when they needed to use their weapons, they just, used them. They didn't explain them. And you saw how the science and the stuff worked through the action of the series. Nobody said, let's explain Starfleet. Nobody said, let's explain why these guys are in uniform. It's like and that's what a lot of writers still do, which, to the detriment of, the stories they're developing, is they try to, sit and explain the world to the reader. And you don't need to do that. Just put the reader in the world and let them work with the characters, let them see the characters in action. And that's, I think, what Star Trek did really well from that very first episode.
I just never watched it when I was that little. I just didn't. I watched I came into that as a teen during when it was rerunning. Um I did watch stuff. Like I watched that what's the name of it? Leslie Nielsen, Walter
Oh,
Pidgeon.
that was a movie called
Yeah.
Forbidden Planet. You're talking
Forbidden
about
Planet.
Forbidden
Like, yeah,
Planet.
I can't believe I blanked out on Forbidden Planet's name. Um Yeah, Forbidden Planet. I remember that. I fell in love with Robbie the Robot. Um,
Mhm.
I,
I have
I
always.
also had a crush on not Leslie Nielsen, but Walter Pigeon. I thought he was adorable.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, uh, yeah, that was a really good movie. That you can, if you watch Forbidden Planet, you actually kind of see the beginnings of Star Trek, and I'm sure that was an influence on Gene Roddenberry, because you've got that crew that are part of a semi-military kind of service that are out there, responding to like a need. It's like as far as, hey, this guy's been on this planet, we have to check on him, that sort of thing, find out what happened to the team that crashed there or whatever. So and then dealing with a mysterious force that comes after them. So there's a
Don't tell
lot
what
of.
it is.
I won't. There's a
Don't
lot of
give
there's a lot of
spoilers.
there's a lot of Star Trek in Forbidden Planet, or a lot of Forbidden Planet in Star Trek, if you want to
Oh
put it
yeah,
that way. And
yeah.
it was a high concept movie. It was about the alien race that was there, and how they evolved, and what happened to them, which I won't say anymore, to give things away. But yeah, so that was a really good movie. Also, the first one of the first movies, I guess, to use the theremin for a music soundtrack.
Yeah, that was
So it's
cool
all more
though.
mysterious.
Who knew what a theremin was back then? It was just really, wow, that's really cool music.
Mhm. Now I've always liked robots for some reason, I don't know, but Robbie the robot was great.
Oh, I
Again,
love him.
another robot named Robbie that I talked about from Fireball XL5, and then the robot from Lost in Space,
Lots
which
of
doesn't
space.
really doesn't really have a name other than robot, but technically it was the B9 robot. Loved that
Danger,
robot.
Will Robinson, danger.
Oh, I'll tell you a really quick story, where the robot saved us a little bit. But we had a pipe burst in our house at one point, and my wife Jane, she was upstairs, and she knows I yell upstairs to her all the time, and she never pays attention to me whatsoever. Well, when the pipe burst, I needed her help immediately. So and I knew if I yelled upstairs, she would just ignore me and or say what or whatever. And I needed, like, there's water flooding through the kitchen and into the living room and all this stuff. I needed help immediately to get some
Turn off
things
the
under
water.
control. So I just basically yelled up the stairs. It's like, danger, danger. and,
Yeah, but
and
but the movies don't have any influence on us.
no, movies don't have any influence, but it worked because that was the one thing she had no idea where that came from. It's like she had to come and figure out what the hell I was screaming. So that, and we managed to get the pipe shut off and get the disaster people to come out and start doing, cleaning up the mess and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so if you ever need some, just like, danger, Will Robinson is like, what the, but
Yeah, but people today, kids today don't know it because they never watched the show Lost in Space. They may
oh,
have watched one of the remake movies, but
mm.
I don't think they actually have seen the old ones. At least I
Well,
don't
the
think so.
the remake movies are excellent, but the old ones are fun.
Yeah.
So that's one way to put it. The old ones are just a lot of fun, because I think the cast was having fun and they took us along on the fun adventure.
I
Even
mean,
if it
look at
was
the
campy.
cast. Guy Williams and
June Lockhart,
June Lockhart, thank you. And
Cartwright, Angela
Cartwright.
Cartwright.
Yeah, Angela
Okay.
Cartwright. And it just had a hell of, and Mark Goddard, and it just had a hell of a, and Bill Mummy, of course, and
Uh-huh.
um
Jonathan Harris. Jonathan
Jonathan
Harris.
Harris.
Okay. Yeah.
Jonathan Harris. Oh, I just found out something very interesting about him. That was also part of the interview with Bill Mummy. Uh, Jonathan Harris was considered for many years a gay icon. Did you know that he was happily married for 62 years to a woman who was like his life partner, and they were like totally incandescently in love with each other.
I did not know. I did not know that, but
Yeah,
he was a tremendous actor, and his character was a lot of fun. But
because he was so campy, they
campy, he
just
was so campy.
assumed.
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep. Uh,
but and he didn't mind. He said that's fine because that
yeah,
kept his private life private, and he said that's fine, whatever they want. I don't have a problem with it. That's what a good guy Jonathan Harris was. You know, he just whatever people want, that's fine.
no. So, and just as far as science fiction influencing our lives and on the Star Trek and Lost in Space, one of my best friends who eventually became my brother-in-law married my sister and is still, close. My sister passed away actually a few years ago, but he's still a close, friend, family member kind of person. Met him in high school because we got into an argument on the bus as to whether or not Lost in Space was better than Star Trek. So
Oh, and you
that's
introduced him to your
that's how we
sister.
met. And
That's
oh yeah,
interesting.
yeah, just through hanging around. I wasn't planning to make any matchmaking or anything. He just when we hung around, that's how he met my sister. But
I'm so sorry for your loss. That's terrible.
oh no,
Uh,
I'm the last one in my family almost because um I my mom had me as when she was older. She was in her 40s, so I was like the miracle baby, at the end of having a family. And I had already had like three siblings before me, which I had an older sister named Rose, a younger sister named Mickey, which is the one who married uh, uh,
your buddy.
my brother-in-law. And um and I had a brother who we called Pudge. And they were all, by the time I was growing up, they were pretty much grown out of high school and gone. My one sister got married and she was gone. My other sister was getting a career in medicine. She became a microbiologist kind of. And My brother was off in the Marines, and then he was doing becoming a pilot and that sort of thing. So I rarely saw them at all, and they've all passed away at this point. So I was the oldest kid, and I'm the last survivor, and my parents passed away a long time ago. So I'm the last person standing in my family. So except
Oh,
I actually have some relatives out west that we didn't even meet until very recently. But I have my brother's kids, who are out there and still, maintain some contact. But um, so anyway, don't know how I got onto that, but
I don't know. I felt sad because you lost your sister.
there you
Uh,
go.
um, another show that I was a movie that I loved, and you know it, is The Time Machine.
hmm
That
and
was
that's the
that
one
was a
with
great influence with
Rod.
me.
Was it Rod
Rod
Taylor?
Taylor,
There
yummy.
you go. There you go. And
And
again, it's machines.
Yvette
If you put any,
Mimeo.
yeah, if you put any, well, let's put it to show you how much of a geek I am. It's like if you have a movie and you have Yvette Mimeo in it, and you have a machine that looks like it can travel through time, I'm gonna watch it because there's a machine that looks like it can travel through time.
Not Yvette Mimeo, huh? Well, the thing is
And I'm
about
I'm
the
I'm
time
all I'm
traveling
all, I'm
machine.
also I'm also married to a wonderful wife who we're incandescently happy and that sort of thing. But the only person she needs to be worried about is whether there's a robot.
There's a robot.
It's like, if Bina if the robot from Lost in Space comes, and comes calling, it's like, hey, I might sit here and talk to the robot forever. But yeah, so there was a time machine,
The time
and
machine. What I
and it
was
looked
gonna
really
say was
super cool.
it is such a beautiful machine. I mean, that prop was when I've seen it in person at a big convention in LA when I was a teenager, and it is one of the most beautiful props
Mhm.
I have ever seen.
It
It
absolutely
it
is.
was done so well. It was so gorgeous. I mean, I know it was gold lame. It wasn't real gold, but man, did that thing glitter.
And the movie was so imaginative just in the way it was
Mhm.
done. Like at the beginning, he has essentially the model of the time machine, which is his
It
like
was so
prototype,
beautiful
and
too.
it's a little tiny, it's a handheld version of the time machine with its little levers, and he reaches in with a finger and he pushes the little levers in the little
Uh-huh.
miniature time machine, and it pops away into the future.
And you're
it's
like,
like, wow, that is so
no.
cool.
You're like, don't, no, I love that thing. Don't do that.
But
That
yeah,
was my,
so
I
I
mean, when I was a little girl when I saw that, I think I was about 10 or 11. First of all, I fell in love with Rod Taylor. Sorry, I know everybody's in love with machines and stuff, but yeah, I was in love with Rod Taylor.
I understand
Uh,
that. I understand that. So,
and and there were so many great actors in that movie. People don't remember Alan Young and Sebastian Cabot,
oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
Alan Young was his buddy who showed up in a different guise as he went into the future, and
yeah, it was his son. He
and
played his own son.
he got he Alan Young was the character who got the last word in the movie, if I
Yeah,
remember. It's like, which books
yeah.
would have you taken into the
Which
future to
books would
build
you have
civilization?
chosen? Which isn't in the
Yep.
book, by the way. They made that up for the
Oh,
movie.
but it's so super cool. You know,
I
it's
know
like
my
that's
dad used it as a teaching thing. He says, "Okay, after we watch the movie, what books would you three read? What three books would you two choose?"
yeah. So that
I,
definitely was a formative movie. Now the big one for me was 2001: A Space Odyssey. Uh, I forget. I think I was probably did that come out in '66? When did it? Because I feel like I was 9 or 10 or something like that. So
I don't know.
2001: A
I know it was
Space
in the
Odyssey.
60s, but I don't remember exactly.
Let me see when that came out. I'm gonna look that up. Space, okay, 1968. So it was a couple of years after Star Trek. Um,
Uh-huh.
I would have been 9, 10, like 10 or 11, something like that. And here's how much of an influence that movie had on me. Um, you know how in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Roy Neary has his experience, and for some reason he, comes home and he starts, sculpting the Devil's Tower in mashed potatoes and clay and all that kind of stuff, and he's totally obsessed with that. Well, that's what happened to me when I saw 2001. I didn't come home and sculpt, the Devil's Tower in mashed potatoes, but I basically started getting drawing materials and crayons and pens and anything I could lay my hands on, and for weeks and weeks I would do nothing except draw scenes from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I would make up my own scenes, and I still have some of these things that I did way back then squirreled away somewhere in a cupboard or something. But so I would just draw the spaceships, and I would draw guys in pressure suits, and I would draw the alien planets and the lights and all the it just totally obsessed me. And even to this day, I think of 2001 as one of the greatest movies ever made, and I try to explain it to people with my more mature thing. And because for my wife it's just a space movie, and I try to, and she says, well, there's really not a lot of plot, and the dialogue is and dialogue doesn't do very much. And I try to explain, but it was so meta. The dialogue's not supposed to do very much. There's not supposed to be, they're subverting all the regular things that are supposed to happen, for the purpose of this kind of meta play that talks about the future course of humanity and all this stuff, and so, but nobody cares.
I'm sure the director appreciated you explaining it so clearly to your wife.
Yes. But for me it remains so almost like a little mini religious experience kind of thing is what 2001: A Space Odyssey
Well,
is for me.
it's still an influence. I mean, even the Barbie movie used it.
I have not seen the Barbie movie.
I haven't either, but they showed the scene when they were interviewing the
Oh,
director,
okay.
and
Okay.
apparently the director is a huge classics movie fan, and there's all these influences like Katharine Hepburn and things like that. And one of them was 2001: Space Odyssey, and she loved that movie, so she had to put a little reference into it. There's a lot of catnip in there with different references to old movies.
Cool.
I haven't seen it yet. I just
Well,
I'd like to see it, but I haven't gone to see it. So I'm waiting for it to
I've
come
heard
out.
that it's very good and engaging even for audiences that aren't necessarily Barbie audiences. So
No, it's actually not for the Barbie audiences. It's actually for everybody. That's what she said. She said it is for the Barbie audience because it was an anniversary, one of the anniversaries of Barbie. And I was a Barbie girl. I had Barbies, but I was like, because I've seen the cartoons and stuff, and I was like, I have no interest in a movie with live action Barbies acting the way they did in the cartoons. Because I saw one of the cartoons when I was a kid, and when I was about, I guess, 10, and I said, this is really stupid. so
okay.
so after that, I never watched, but this one sounds actually interesting because it's Barbie breaking out of Barbieville and living in the real world. So that sounds really interesting to me.
Sure, I'm sure my wife and I will watch it. We're just gonna have to wait until it gets like Netflix or one of
Well,
the Amazon
that's what I
Prime
said.
or something. And
I'm waiting for it to stream.
yeah. Once it's streaming, we'll probably watch it for a little bit.
I
Now,
mean,
what
it's
about?
still
Go
gonna
ahead.
drag all the kids to it, so you don't want to have to fight the kids.
Um, now what about in that same 60-ish time period, did you watch like the Charlton Heston movies? Like there was Planet of the Apes and there was the Omega Man and there was Soylent Green. Did you watch any of those science fiction movies?
No,
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean, I saw Ten Commandments and I saw Ben Hur,
Okay. There you go.
but no,
I saw
I never
I
saw
saw
any of those.
I also
Sorry.
saw 10. That's okay. I also saw 10 Commandments and I also saw Ben-Hur, which I liked a lot. Um, but so he did a string. I'm not sure I'm catching them all necessarily, but he did a string of science fiction ones, and Planet of the Apes obviously was is probably one of the more famous ones that's come down through the years. And it's just a cool fun adventure where 2001 was more like a almost like I said a quasi kind of spiritual experience. Planet of the Apes is more straightforward adventure science fiction kind of thing when these time travelers come back and find the world is ruled by intelligent apes and that sort of thing. But it has some very nice points and very good acting, and has Roddy McDowall in it as one of the chimpanzees, and Roddy McDowall as a chimpanzee is one of the most watchable actors anywhere. So
I mean, it
um
had great actors. I know that. It had Kim Hunter, it had Maurice Evans. I know who
uh-huh.
was in it. I just never could get into it. It just wasn't
And
my type.
yeah, neither can my wife. Don't worry about it. But so there's that. The Omega Man is a remake of there's a Vincent Price movie called The Last Man on Earth, um, which is about him being the last man on Earth in a world that's dominated by these kind of zombies, although they're kind of very slow, lethargic kind of zombies kind of thing. But they're always trying to get him, and he's trying to survive, and they're repelled by garlic and that sort of thing. So it's an old black and white movie, the one with Vincent
Like
Price.
vampires.
Yeah, maybe they are vampires, but I think they were zombies. I don't know, but it's sort of a classic black and white movie. And the Omega Man is Charlton Heston's, updated version of that, where the world has gotten some kind of virus and people are kind of, civilization is collapsing and only his blood can save them. And then Will Smith remade it recently, and I forget what the title of his movie was. but so it's an engaging concept, and it's been made a number of times. And then Soylent Green was Charlton Heston in a world which actually in the timeline has passed us by, because their future might have been 2022 or something, and it was about the overpopulation and not enough food, and Soylent Green is people, which isn't giving away much of a plot point, because everybody, that's like, if you look anything up, it says Soylent Green is people. um
The thing that I remember during this period was I think it's a George Lucas movie, and Bruce Dern, and he was on a planet and he had little plants and he talked to them.
Okay. I don't think that's George Lucas. That is Douglas Trumbull, I think. I'd have to look that up. But are you talking about Silent Running?
That's it.
Bruce
Silent
Dern
Running.
Silent Running. That is also one of
That's
my
an
favorite
awesome
movies.
movie. I've seen
It,
that.
the one of the reasons that's one of my favorite movies is because it has three great robots in it. It has Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
I like Bruce Dern. He plays these wacko characters. He's really,
And that was one where he wasn't the bad guy.
hmm
He the movie required him to be a little psychotic to move the plot forward and that sort of thing. But it's basically, for those people who don't know it, it takes place on these large spaceships where they've taken, Earth has gone through its climate change, whatever, and lots of things have died, and they've taken the last remaining forests and biosphere and stuff, and they've shipped them into orbit and put them into these large, biodome spaceships, which are monitored by crews and their robot, companions, kind of thing. But at some point, Earth decides that it's just not worth the money, and they just order the ships to, you know jettison their forests and blow them up. Except Bruce Dern doesn't do that. He rebels and tries to maintain the forest. So and this is a movie from like the 60s, so it
hmm
almost sounds like something that was made today, but it was made quite a while ago. And it is a good movie, and like I said, it's got Huey, Dewey, and Louie as little robots, so you gotta watch it for that. And if I had to have a robot, I'd take one of those guys.
They are cute. They are cute. And there was another thing that a show I used to watch was Buck Rogers in the 21st
25th
century.
century. Yeah,
25th
I think it was
century?
25th century. And that's oh crap, what's the guy's name? I can picture Aaron
Gil
Gray.
Gerard and
Gil
Aaron
Gerard. Aaron
Gray.
Gray. Gil
And I
Gerard and
knew
Aaron
Aaron
Gray.
Gray. I met her.
She also played in, like, was it Silver Spoons?
Yeah. And
Okay.
that was one of my work that I worked on that show.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that was when I was acting. That was one of my acting jobs. She
cool.
came to my college and gave because she went to my community college, and she came to my class because my professor was her professor, and came and talked. And so when I went to work on Silver Spoons, I waited till lunch and I'm sitting across from her and I said, I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember coming to my school and giving a lecture? And she goes, sure I do. Were you in? Yeah, I remember you. We started talking for about 15 minutes and she likes ignoring everybody and we're just talking about Dr. Dow and all this stuff. It was really funny. but anyway, she's a really nice lady.
That's great. I put Buck Rogers in 25th Century as one of those shows that's a little. I classify it like Lost in Space, in the sense that they weren't being so much hard science as they were people who are having fun doing their thing, and that sort of came across, that it was just an enjoyable show because the people were enjoyable.
Yeah, my dad
Rather,
pooed it. He said it was science fantasy. My dad was
it
a
is.
hardline
There's a
science
lot of.
fiction person, so he wouldn't watch it.
Mhm. I understand that. Now, I will say that of all the robots in all of science fiction that I've fallen in love with, I did not like their robots.
Oh, I like their
Tweak,
robot. I
uh,
liked.
Tweak,
She was
Tweaky,
really
I
cool.
Tweaky, I just didn't like that much. And then, like in the second season or whatever, they had a larger more clunky robot, and it didn't do anything for me either. So so yeah, those just were not, they it felt to me like the robot should have been far more advanced or whatever by that point, and they didn't seem to be.
I
But
know, but I like that show. It was fun.
so
Uh,
yeah,
but
now
that was one
got
of the shows I remember.
um yes. So trying to think back to some movies and things. We talked about Charlton Heston. Logan's Run. Did you ever see Logan's Run?
Yes, of course. That one I
Okay,
saw.
of course.
It's not my favorite, but yeah, I mean, it's a Disney movie. Well, they're separate touchstone thing, but it's still a
Okay.
Disney movie.
Well,
So I've
speaking of
seen
Disney movies, there was The Black Hole.
that. I loved. I
Okay.
love the Black Hole. I thought that was I think we went to see it as a movie, and I was with my parents, my brother, and I was just staring at the screen, and we were watching the credits, and I was still staring at the screen. I don't even think I was looking at the credits. Uh,
Okay. So that was is his name Maximilian Schell? Is that the
yeah,
actor?
Maximilian Schell,
Okay.
great actor.
And he's the standout. It's like if you watch the movie, his performance is the one you're going to remember. He's the bad guy, but his performance is the one you're going to remember. Now, they had a really cool robot, which I actually have a model of that's sitting on my shelf that I've had for probably 35 years or something like that, the model kit that I built. What was the robot's name?
Can't remember.
Might have been Max. I don't know. But he was really cool. He had multiple arms on each shoulder, and each one had different instruments and stuff. And one of them had a murderous, whirring blade thing, which I'm not sure what he did with other than kill people.
I
But
just thought it was beautiful. The special effects were just gorgeous.
it was a big cinematographic movie extravaganza kind of thing, which you'd expect from Disney. So if you
Yeah.
saw it in the theater, you would, they definitely put things together in such a way to give you that large screen experience. And also Roddy McDowall was the one little robot, the voice of the one little robot, which
I
I
love
can't.
Roddy. I love him in anything he did. He was one of my favorite
Oh,
actors.
that's a reason for you to watch Planet of the Apes.
I just can't. I
and return
tried.
and
Don't you
return
think I
and
tried?
return to planet and what is it, return to escape from Planet of the Apes. I think he was an escape
I
from Planet
would
of the
watch
Apes.
it for Maurice
and
Evans,
and
who taught me
and
how to do Shakespeare on Bewitched. If I could, I love Roddy, but I love
just
Maurice
can't
even
do that.
more.
Yeah, all right,
Yes,
all right.
sorry.
So
Uh, I don't know. I don't. Maybe it's because it's. I don't. I have no idea. I just could never. I've tried a few times, even later, and I just because like I said, I love the act Kim Hunter. I love the actors in it. I cannot bring myself to watch that movie. I try. I think I can. I last 15 minutes into where the monkeys come, and
can't
I
get
just
past that. Well,
no.
we've talked a lot about science fiction, and there's probably a lot more we can talk about. But I wanted to see if there were any both horror movies, monster movies, and or fantasy movies that you really appreciated too. Growing up.
Okay, I'm not a horror girl,
Okay,
so Zippo.
so,
Um,
no monsters, no Godzilla, no Reptilicus,
no. The
no
thing is
creature
that
from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea or whatever.
I could watch I could watch comedies that are hard. Like I could watch Love at First Bite
Okay, I
and
remember that one.
and The Ghost Breakers with Bob Hope and Paulette Goddard
Hmm.
and which is really funny if you've never seen it. And The Cat and the Canary with Bob Hope and Polly
Okay,
Goddard.
that one I don't know,
Like
but that gives. Mhm.
yeah, they're all comedy. Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein. I could see Young Frankenstein. There's another comedy.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, comedy that have horror elements, yes. Horror movies, no. Does that make any
Okay,
sense?
sure. What about fantasies? Like, did you ever see Dragon Slayer?
Yeah, I love fantasy and I love
Okay,
dragons. So yeah.
Dragon
And
Slayer was really good. Willow.
yeah, I never saw Willow. I wanted to because I love Jim Henson, but I haven't seen it.
A lot of people seems to have a very big fan base. I did see it in the theater, and I thought it was good, but I never became like a super fan attached to that. But apparently they have a good fan base. And
I mean, I mean, when I started with fantasy, it was when I was a little girl, and you know this because we've talked about is Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. That period, that was my beginning of fantasy. And then for movies, fantasy was like, oh, what's the name of it? Age, really is terrible. Um, I love the
yes.
magical kind of movies. Like I
Okay.
love Mary Poppins, and
Okay.
I love Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and
How about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang?
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I adored. I watched that every Christmas. Was it Christmas or Easter that they showed it? I can't remember. I think it was Easter. Every Easter they
Okay.
would show it.
And if we're getting into things that were repeated every year as like a seasonal thing, The Wizard of Oz.
Yes, of course, Wizard of
Okay.
Oz, and also, um, I watched Christmas Carol with my father's favorite Christmas Carol was the one with Alistair Sim. So that's the one we
Okay.
watched every year. Although I've
Okay.
seen several of them. I've seen Patrick Stewart's, and I've seen the Muppet movie with Michael Caine, and I've seen the Muppets. I've all the Muppet stuff. Uh,
Yes. Yes, my wife is a very big Muppet fan and a very big Jim Henson fan. And
yeah, I'm a big Jim
that she
Henson fan.
yeah, she absolutely loves all of that. And It's a Wonderful Life. Um
Yes, of course, Jimmy Stewart.
mhm.
Mm.
So
It's a great movie.
it is a
And
great
I love
movie.
Clarence. He's the
Mhm.
most adorable angel ever.
It is a great movie, and regardless of how people, I'm sure people, just because it's been repeated so many times and they think it's a trite message or whatever, it's a perfectly real, accurate message. It
Mhm.
rings as true today as it did when it was made, and everything you do in your life does have an effect on those around you, which would be quite different if you weren't around, and that
Well,
sort
I
of thing.
also think it's interesting that I can't remember. Was it Billy Wilder? No, it wasn't Billy Wilder. I can't remember who the director was, but he
Yeah.
was. Go ahead. You know who it
Oh,
is?
was it Frank Capra?
It
I
could be
don't know.
Capra. It's very Capra-esque. So yeah, probably Frank
Let me
Capra.
look up It's a Wonderful Life.
I mean, Donna Reed, everybody in it is wonderful, but I think
Yeah,
in
that's Frank
one,
Capra. That's Frank
yeah,
Capra.
I saw an interview with him, and he said that he wanted to do a movie where Scrooge doesn't redeem himself.
Ah,
And that was one of the things he was looking for. He didn't want the bad guy to become a good guy at the end. He wanted him to stay a bad guy, and everybody overwhelms him, and by their goodness they win.
cool.
That was the point of the movie, was that normal people who come together and care about each other is more important than greedy horrible people who try to destroy other people. Actually, we could use that today.
Well, that's true. Well, at DreamForge, we try to find some of those stories, so people should, follow us there. But
Yeah.
other movies, War of the Worlds, the 1950s one. Did you
No, not a
50s
fan.
or 60s one? Not a fan of
I,
that
I,
one.
I
Okay.
love H.G. Wells, but that's not one that I like.
Okay. That again, that fascinated me, and again, probably because of the mechanics of it, the idea just of aliens with more advanced technology and that sort of thing, and how do you resist that? So I would have, and the fact that there were aliens and that they actually made them look like aliens. That's one of the for me that's one of the high points of that particular movie, where everything that is science fiction, these days, and certainly was a Star Trek trope, is that aliens are humans with, different ears or different head shapes or whatever it might be. But in the original War of the Worlds movie, with Gene Barry, the aliens are truly alien with, different body shapes and eyes and that sort of thing. And
I
so
gotta tell you,
I loved
from
that.
that period, my favorite is The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That is one. First of all, it's a beautiful movie. It's beautifully shot. It's gorgeous. It has Michael Rennie, which helps. For the
Hmm.
guys, it has Patricia Neal, which helps. Um,
And
and
it has Gort again. It's like if you're talking to me, it's like, why is that a great movie? Oh, it's Gort.
it is. It got, yeah. I love Gorg. I love him. I mean, you don't love him at the beginning because he's kind of scary, but once you realize that he's a good guy, he's adorable. But when
So
you're watching the movie, when you first see him, he's in it, and they shoot at Michael Rennie. I can't remember the character name in the movie.
yeah,
Um, and Gorg
it might have
shoots
been
back.
Klaatu. I know there's the phrase Klaatu Baratas Nikto or whatever. I think his name might have actually been Klaatu. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it might be Klaatu. Yeah, because that was his name before he told him, come, I need you. Uh, but he told him not to because he was about to wipe them all out, and he was like, no, to him before he was taken by ambulance to the hospital. But I love that movie. I mean, that was the second time I saw Sam Jaffe. The first time I saw Sam Jaffe was in Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Okay.
He was the crook who wanted the other half of the book about Naboombu, and but he played the scientist in The Day the Earth Stood Still, and he was like the physicist of the time in America, and him talk. It was I'd never heard anything like what he was saying. It was amazing. I mean, that's just an amazing. Billy Gray plays the little boy. I met him at a signing, and he said that's his favorite movie that he ever made.
It is a really good movie. Um,
But it's
another
black
movie
and
from
white, and a lot of people won't watch black and white, which really makes me sad.
that's interesting because one of the things as I grew up, because one of the things I wanted to say just briefly was I started out with the love of science fiction and fantasy for not the effects, but for kind of visual things. It's like, oh, that's a really cool robot. That's a really cool device. That's a really cool concept kind of thing. And over time, and as I went to college, I became like an English major. And over time that evolved into a love of story. So
Mhm.
then I evaluate things differently now than I did then, which is I'm looking at, well, what's the story? How are we empathizing with the protagonist and how do we, get involved emotionally in their trials and the things that obstacles that they're trying to overcome, and then language as an English major as well. It's like, what's the writing like, and because these days I'm as like my wife's a very visual person because she's a graphic artist, and she'll get involved and it's like, oh my God, that is an absolutely gorgeous shot, and look how well that 3 CGI is being done where you can see the movement in the fabrics and all that stuff. And I'm the one who's watching. It's like, that was a really cool line. It's like that's like a perfect sentence, and it fits right in context, and it's beautiful, and it propels the story forward, whatever. And I'm listening to the language and that sort of thing. And I guess what I'm trying to do is circle around to that idea of you saying, but it's in black and white. That stuff never bothers me. It's like
It
the
doesn't
movie
bother
can
me
be in
either.
the
I
movie
grew
can be
up
in
that
black and
way.
white. Yeah, and you if you watch the older movies from the 40s and 50s where
Uh-huh,
they might be
which I love.
they might be driving a car, but really behind them is a
It's
screen on which the road is
green.
being projected, or they're riding a horse, but they're not really riding a horse, they're just like sitting in front of the camera, but the background is moving, and because they're projecting film back there, sort of thing. All of which to us today looks incredibly kind of fakey. And to my wife, that would be, I can't, just like you can't watch Planet of the Apes. It's like she would, as soon as she sees a scene like that, it's like, I can't watch this. And
But
for me,
sometimes
it's,
it's clever. Like in Bringing Up
yeah,
Baby, they tried to protect Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn from the leopard.
uh,
So when they're driving in the car and the leopard's in the back, that's actually a different car. It's a different.
mm,
They don't. They were shooting it as two different scenes, and then they connected it together. So because they didn't want their stars in a car alone, even though they weren't alone, but you know what I mean. It's a
yep,
fake car, but they didn't want their stars in a fake car with a leopard, a real leopard.
yeah, yeah.
So
And that's all great, but for me it wouldn't matter. Like if you're doing a scene and it's a science fiction thing and they have to have a ray gun, and the guy picks up essentially a broom handle and says, this is my ray gun and I'm shooting this, it doesn't matter to me at this point, because I'm so involved in story. It's like they're just, for me,
mhm.
whether it's super CGI and it's high def, or whether it's fakey sort of thing, to me they're on a stage and they're using stage props, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine, because I'm okay with that. It's like, what's the story? How am I supposed to be involved with these people, and how what's happening, and how is it written, and that sort of thing. That stuff all means stuff to me, and the other stuff is window dressing. And I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
for yeah,
But the thing is, with the old black and whites, there's certain movies that have that are fantasy. I love, like Topper, the original Topper with Cary Grant and Constance Bennett and Roland Young. The way they did the ghost thing and all this stuff that they did, there was no CGI. It was sort of like what they used to do with Bewitched. There would, people would have to stay in the position for a while until the cocktail glass makes it to their hand and stuff. But it didn't look, and at least, and I watched it recently because I was trying to explain to somebody something and I couldn't get them to understand. So I went on Discord with them and showed them not bringing up baby Topper, so they could understand what I was talking about. And she really enjoyed it. And she says, I can't believe they did special effects like that back in the 30s. But that's the point, just because it's back in the black and white days and it's back in time, that doesn't mean it's not good.
hmm hmm
It doesn't have to be CGI to be good. At least I don't think so.
I agree. Now, talking about a movie that we didn't mention yet, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's in that gap where we're starting to be in color, and we're really starting to concentrate on really cool special effects. I think about, having said that, I think about three movies just came to mind. But did you ever see one called This Island Earth?
I've heard of it, never saw it.
Okay, that one is a special effects extravaganza. So, um, and it's a good science fiction story. It's about aliens who have come to Earth, not to destroy Earth or whatever, but basically to find the best scientists here, because their world is at war and they need the best minds to, try to save their planet and save their civilization from, whatever is marauding against them. And so they basically try to attract scientists. And the whole beginning of the movie is actually attracting scientists by showing them cool stuff. It's like, they send the protagonist of the piece, they send him a catalog where he can buy electronic parts that he can't get anywhere else, and then they send him an instruction sheet to build essentially kind of telecommunications sort of computerish device that's called an interocitor that nobody's ever heard of, but there are the instructions and he builds it. So the beginning part is a very cool plot element to draw the scientist in, and then they get them and take them off to another planet, and you've got really good special effect, not for the time, really good special effects about the spaceship and the alien planet and that kind of thing. It's you'll often see a poster of a big bug-like looking alien holding the woman kind of thing, or attacking the woman kind of thing, which is what they had to do in that day to attract audiences, but that scene never actually happens in the entire movie. So that's a cool one. Another spacey one that they did, which was very hard science fiction-y, was Mars, a trip to Mars called Conquest of Space. And that one was also in color and was sort of like the 2001 of its time, where they were trying to be very accurate in their science. And I
I
remember
don't
that one
remember
because
that even coming out. I don't remember that movie. Was that
that
in
one,
the 70s? I
when was
don't remember.
Conquest of Space? It actually ended up, we had a set of encyclopedias growing up, and the stills from that movie were actually in the encyclopedia to represent space travel.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. Not
Conquest
Apollo
of
11 or something,
Space.
but an old movie.
Yes. Well, there was no Apollo 11.
Oh, okay. It hadn't
But
happened
at
yet.
that point, because the Conquest of Space was a 1955 movie.
Oh, okay.
So I probably saw it on TV on the Saturday growing up or something. Definitely did, because I wasn't born yet. That was 2 years before I was born. But I remember it as having Eric Fleming in it, who played Gil Favor in Rawhide. He was the trail boss. So that's the connection there, because I'm also a big cowboy movie fan. But it had Eric Fleming. It had Ross Martin, who was in The Wild Wild
Oh,
West.
I love Ross Martin. He's one of my
Um,
favorite actors.
yeah.
He
So
was
and
wonderful. To me, he's my
Phil,
favorite. I know everybody likes uh, Jim West, but I
you
loved
like
him.
Ross Martin? He was really good.
Oh, he was my
And
favorite with all his makeup and costumes, and he's such a good
and it
actor.
also had Phil Foster in Conquest of
Oh,
Space, and he was he Laverne's father in Laverne and
yes,
Shirley? Okay,
yes.
so Phil Foster was in it. Um, so yeah, so that's like a technical space movie, a little 2001-ish. They're not fighting monsters or anything. It's all about the spaceship, and it's all about the mission, and essentially cracking up on landing and having to get the spaceship ready to take off, because they have to only have such a chance to get back to Earth. So it's kind of like that. There were others in that period that were a little like that. There was like Rocket Ship XM, and I forget, there was another one I think that was based on a Heinlein novel that that we're talking about rocket ships. But I would have seen those. I would have seen those on like Saturday afternoons. Um,
That's probably
because
why I didn't. I was too busy watching the other stuff that I was mentioning before.
uh,
But yeah, I mean, a lot of my fantasy stuff was, I love Bewitched. I watched Bewitched. I was a huge Bewitched fan.
so yours, what
Um,
the impression I'm getting is you're where I'm attracted a lot by the really hard technical stuff in science, and especially the robots. You're a lot of what you appreciate is kind of the just the magical kind of everyday kind of thing, because Bewitched is um
it's a
I don't want to use
fantasy.
the word, I don't want to it's a fantasy, but I don't want to use the word lighthearted. It's an engaging, um it is light, but it's an engaging kind of just family thing. It's a little bit like the fantasy version of the Andy Griffith Show, if you want to think of it that way. It's there are
It's a
these
little bit.
nice, there are these nice people involving you in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Andy Griffith Show, but I always thought that there was a point to Bewitched. That
Okay, all
Be,
right.
Bewitched is about the
Hmm.
accepting other
You're
people.
right. You're right.
Uh,
You're absolutely
it was
right.
it was all about you know, and she even says, they have an argument. Oh yes, you took in the little witch. How big of you? You know,
Yeah.
that was what it was
Yep.
about. It was
You're
about
you're absolutely right.
at
Um,
least that's the way I look at it. That's what I think it was.
mhm.
And being open to things that you're not used to, or you know, like magic, but not magic necessarily, but being open to people and types of things. It wasn't just the strange relatives. They had all different kinds of people on Bewitched. So I actually thought it was pretty ahead of its time.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I can't get
And
over the two Darrens though.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I mean, when I was a little girl, I didn't see it because I was a little girl. But yeah, when I watched it in rerun as I got older, I go, "Oh God, he's different." And then I looked at, oh, they're both Dick, but they have different last names.
Oh.
I didn't, you know, I mean, that was so clever that they had sort of same facial structure and that their names both were Dick,
Mhm.
you know, Dick York and Dick Sargent.
Yep.
I thought it was clever. Uh,
But yes,
well,
I would have watched Bewitched. And I
you
Dream
did
of
watch it or
Jeannie.
you wouldn't?
I
You
did.
did
No, I
watch it
did.
or you?
I did. I did. I probably saw every episode of Bewitched. I didn't I like with Star Trek, I would have watched the episodes over and over again obsessively. So till the point where, like I was talking about my brother-in-law earlier, it's like there was a point where we pretty much had the original series episodes all memorized. Like we could quote dialogue back and forth from those episodes. But Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and stuff like that, I would have watched them. They would have been a regular part of my stuff, but I wouldn't have obsessed over them. I would probably have seen them once or twice, watched them a little bit in syndication. So,
The thing is the interesting thing to me is I got into Star Trek when I was a teenager. Um, so I was about, I don't remember. I mean, I was a teenager, but I don't remember the exact age I was. But that's when I started watching Star Trek, and I did become obsessed when I started watching it. Um, but I didn't watch it as a little girl, and I think the problem was is that darn salt monster scared me because
oh,
I was
okay.
a very sensitive little girl,
Okay.
and that's obviously I don't watch horror movies. I'm just very sensitive. Um, but yeah, so when I got older, I gave it another shot, but I skipped that episode.
Okay.
Um, I did end up watching it later. Um, I got, you know, when I started watching it, there was no such thing as recordings.
Hmm.
So you basically to watch all 39 episodes, I just had to be home when the show was on and
Oh
mark
yeah.
off on my Star Trek book that I bought all the
Oh yeah.
all the episodes that I'd seen until I got to all 39.
Yes, we are from before the age of recording. There were no VCRs. Now, what my brother-in-law and I did before that age was we there was a point where during our teenagers we got cassette recorders,
I
and
did that too. I did that
yeah,
too.
so we would basically hang a microphone in front of the TV and record the audio from Star Trek so that we could listen to the episode over again. I still
I
actually
was
have one of those cassettes in my collection that had particularly good sound. It was a particularly good cassette tape, and I still have it. It was for an episode called The Journey to Babel.
well, that's a
But
good
yes,
episode. Yeah.
we used to have complete collections of that, and we used to be able to go back and forth in dialogue. He has a much better memory than I do, so he can probably still do significant portions of the dialogue.
There was a story I heard, and I think it's fascinating. I don't remember. I think it was either Bill Shatner or Leonard Nimoy who told the story. And during Vietnam, people who were prisoners of war would keep their sanity by doing entire shows of Star Trek.
Wow. Okay. That's really
That
cool.
yeah, it helped them survive. They just went back and forth. It was uh, two or three of them were big Star Trek fans, and they got the whole barracks into it sooner or later. It was the way they survived being a prisoner of war.
Yes, and
I
I
thought,
can
isn't it
see that
fascinating?
because yeah, I believe that and can see that because doing anything that's creative and imaginative that you can lose yourself in is something that can help you get past, rough things that you're going through,
Mhm.
whether it's something like that or pain or depression or whatever. Art is therapy. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter what kind of art it is. If you can put yourself into the creative process, I think it helps you through a can help you through a great deal. It takes you out of yourself, and it you know makes you work with other people, and it really just can help you get out of the mindset of any troubles you might be having, or what's going on. So I'm a big fan of doing things like plays and magazines and TV and creative stuff, and whatever it is, go do it if imagination can save you.
And actually, it's really helpful reading books to dive into it, especially when the pandemic was going on. I think I read every book I owned. I mean, I was just reading my head off, you know. And because some of it, I was really not well. I didn't have COVID, but I had something else that I was really sick. And so I would be curled up in bed with my books. And it was like, yeah, okay, I love, I'm going to go a little off subject. I love Agatha Christie, and I read every single Perot, Miss Marple, Tommy and Tuppence book.
Okay.
It helped me survive.
I understand that. I understand that.
I mean, it
Um,
might be a little wacko, but that was.
No, not at all. I like, not to get into, uh too much like personal stuff, but just that idea of when I was growing up, a couple of things that influenced my childhood was that when I was kind of a very sickly kid, in part because my mom was one of the original no anti-vaxxers, way before there was an anti-vaxxer movement. She didn't want me to get my vaccinations and stuff, resulting in the fact that I had every freaking childhood
Every
disease.
childhood disease that you could get,
I
yeah.
had measles, whooping cough, uh, bronchitis. I don't, everything, chicken pox. What diseases are there? I had them. I missed so much school that I had to get held back. All that kind of stuff. As well as, unfortunately, my dad, was an alcoholic and somewhat, kind of chaotic and abusive. Um, and so tough childhood, but I never felt sorry for myself in that sense of being depressed and that sort of thing, because I had imaginative things to focus on. It's like
Mhm.
whatever it was, it's like I was engaging myself in my toys or in the TV shows or in imaginative things or in reading books, comic books, science fiction and fantasy books. It's like whatever, like that became the focus of my mentality in my life as I learned things. And one of the things that I say freely is like everything I needed to know about life I learned from Star Trek. Because in the absence of immediate close real life role models, that's where I went to see this is how you behave with others, this is how you work in a team, this is how you care for other people, this is how you deal with things logically or imaginatively, or how you show respect or whatever. It's like learned it all from TV, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I know that people famously called television a wasteland, but when we were kids, it really wasn't. There was a lot of good stuff on that was really positive and really taught you good lessons. And yeah, there's some corny. There was some corn. Yeah, absolutely. But even the corn had a point.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's it there's some things that help you that are kind of off, that you wouldn't think would help you. But that's a good thing, you know? If it ignites your imagination, that helps you to it helps you be creative. It helps you to find your way to your creativity. Anything that sparks that's a good thing.
One a conversation we're having recently with a college professor, and we were talking about subjects like this with science fiction and fantasy and imagination and that. And one of the things he said that I hadn't actually thought of, but is something to think about and pursue is is this an accurate statement, was that he knows many people and many people in academia and that sort of thing, and he said some people have imagination and some people don't. And it's not that the people who don't have imagination aren't brilliant. They can be scientists, and they can be academicians and teachers and all this kind of stuff, but they don't have that ability to imagine, to actually conceive of things that outside of their rigorous real life pathway, whatever, however you want to put that. And he was trying to get across the idea that ultimately imagination wins, that imagination is the force that really has moved humanity forward. It's like you can have all these other attributes of understanding math or physics or industrialization or whatever, and you can be very, very practical and all these kind of things, but it's always the imaginative leap that puts things together in the ways that actually move society forward, that move capabilities forward and that sort of thing. And I thought that was a fascinating thought, that it's the people who have the imaginations that basically are able to essentially save the world, if you want to think of it that way.
And if you look at it, like a show like Forbidden Planet with Robbie, people who designed robots first fell in love with Robbie. And people who love Star Trek and are scientists, they've created cell phone. They've created diagnostic equipment like Dr. McCoy has. Pretty much everything except the transporter, which I don't think is going to happen. Um, but pretty much everything in Star Trek has the original has been created, and it's because they got inspired and it sparked their imagination and they just went forward with all their knowledge that they already had as a scientist. That's a good thing.
Yes, it is. Okay, well, I do have to say, unfortunately, that we're running out of time.
Okay.
So I've really super appreciated this. This has been a great deal of fun, and I hope we do it again one day.
Thank
So
you.
let's do a last little bit of commercial here. Tell me what's coming up for Sherri's Playhouse and what's coming up on Chatting with Sherri.
Okay. Actually, it's really funny you mentioned Catherine Kovacic because she's coming up on Thursday, and we're doing a new show. And
Cool.
well, we already did a new show. It's going to be broadcast on Thursday. So, yes, I just started sending out the banner ad, so you can probably see it on one of my pages.
Okay.
And she's got a new book that's a nonfiction book called Australia's Dogs. And she was a veterinarian and she loves dogs, and she has two, and she's just really enthusiastic, and she has really interesting things about that, like military dogs in Australia and stuff like that. It's very interesting. And coming up for Sherri's Playhouse, we're doing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Which we hope comes
Yeah, I
out for
mentioned it
Halloween, but we're
earlier, did
not
I?
sure. Yes, you did.
Yeah,
Which
I
which
thought
which
I
we
did.
which we hope comes out for Halloween, but we're not sure
Yes,
if it'll make it.
you were not
Okay.
sure because of editing and special effects and music and everything that makes a radio play.
Well, whether
So
it makes it or not, I'm looking forward to that. And again, want to really thank you for your time this afternoon. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to some future conversations. So you have a great evening now, Sherri. Okay.
thank you, Scott. You too.